Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Marissa Fraser Morera with Pion, and I will be moderating today's event. Now, this webinar is entitled Cannabis Flower and CBD-Based Sample Preparation Techniques, and will be presented by Martin Schwalm. If you need technical assistance, please look for the chat widget and type your question there. If you get disconnected for any reason during the webcast, just log back in with the same credentials that were sent to you earlier. Pion is the leading provider of tools and analytical instruments that bridges the gap between in vitro experiments and in vivo outcomes. Our instruments help companies confidently decide which drug substances and drug products to progress through the development pipeline, while reducing the risk and of a long-term investment. Our products investigate dissolution, solubility, permeation, ionization, and absorption properties of compounds and drug products. And now, following the acquisition of 2 Square LLC, a provider of automated test and monitoring equipment for pharmaceutical, life science, biotech, and cannabis industries, we are excited to be hosting our first webinar introducing their technology. Now, as I mentioned before, our presenter for today is Martin Schwalm. Martin has a number of executive management positions at both publicly and privately held companies, and has over 20 years of experience in engineering, operations, and business development in the life science laboratory and custom automation marketplace, with a scientific background in thermodynamics, heat transfer, and fluid mechanics. In 1998, he co-founded Hatch Technology, a regional leader in custom automation, developing products for the aerospace, food, consumer products, automotive, life science, and pharmaceutical industries. The Hatch Science Business Division was created in 2006 to enable the company to grow through a product-based strategy aimed at the pharmaceutical industry that transition away from custom equipment development. Now, through these divisions, he established a strong working collaboration with Bristol Myers Squibb and Merck as industry development partners and early adopters of the Hatch products. In 2010, Martin formed 2 Square Science LLC as a unified corporate brand entity to develop and sell 2 Square current and future product lines with national and international growth potential. Martin is a business leader trained as a mechanical engineer with interest and experience in automation, fluid mechanics, heat transfer, software development, and system controls. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Massachusetts, a master's from Brown University, and has met the academic requirements for a PhD from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Martin holds patents in pharmaceutical product development on products he has developed in both the life science and pharmaceutical fields. Without further ado, I will hand things over to our presenter, Martin Schwalm. Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Marissa. Very kind introduction. I appreciate that. Today, welcome everyone. I'll be presenting Pion's products from 2 Square Science. Specifically today, we're going to talk about the 2 Square Science PrepEngine and cannabis-based product sample preparation. Today's presentation is mostly going to focus on flower and the sample preparation of that flower. If I can get the presentation to take the next slide. Marissa, I seem to be having a little bit of computer difficulty.
Let me see if I can scroll down to the next slide.
I think my display is rebooting.
Oops, that's why. Okay, I can see the first slide now.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, so just applications overview for the PrepEngine. The most common sample preparation applications for the PrepEngine are content uniformity in pharmaceutical companies. That's where the PrepEngine started. Impurity testing in the pharmaceutical industry as well. Another application that the PrepEngine spread onto pretty quickly. Today's topic is going to be on cannabis testing labs and how the PrepEngine is used there. And the PrepEngine is also being used for many other applications, including mycotoxin testing, started in the food market and has moved into other areas such as biological areas, including today's topic for cannabis testing. So for the cannabis sample preparation, just an overview. Cannabis flower and cannabis products are tested for direct cannabis use with flower for THC applications, CBD applications, and the many varied products that cannabis is finding its way into today. Prior to testing, the samples need to be collected and prepared. When I say collected, I mean from the different areas of the crop, and then from within the crop, the different parts of the plant. And then we need to create homogeneous samples. The idea is to represent the product that needs to be tested so that we're not just picking on hot spots, as they're called, from the cannabis crop or batch or the flower itself. So this means that we must sample the cannabis flower from specific areas within the flower. For cannabis products such as edibles, it's similar to a content uniformity testing where you want to make sure within the batch that CBD or whatever it is that's being targeted within the product is uniform throughout the product. So the PrepEngine is used to homogenize the sample so that when the testing itself is done, that you get the proper results. The PrepEngine is currently being used successfully for flower preparation, and it can also be used for product preparation using the two main tubes that I'll talk about today, the PrepTube WW as well as the PrepTube Standard. So what are cannabis testing requirements? Cannabis products are tested for potency, specifically when you have THC or CBD or the other cannabinoids, residual solvents, such as a few that are listed here, butane, hexane, heptane. They're tested for terpene content, also tested for mycotoxins, as I mentioned before. We're looking for pesticides and also heavy metals. Testing laboratories have to make sure that the cannabis goods are safe for consumption, and often they need to be checked to make sure they meet label claims. This testing varies a lot right now. It's not standard across the country or internationally. It varies in the form and the use and the geographical market for product to product, even as to what tests are necessary for customer needs or even for to ensure compliance. So if you want, this presentation can be made available afterwards, and the references within this particular slide are really good for getting in depth in specific testing needs. Again, they have to be checked from area to area and within the particular product. I show a slide here that show the 17 common cannabinoids. And so these are some of the things that are being identified, not only being identified within the particular product, but the levels of which are being identified during the testing. The PrepEngine doesn't do that part. The PrepEngine ensures that the sample is homogeneous and that the sample is prepared properly. So that way the testing can be accurate and ensure that you're going to get the proper results and find exactly what you want. So for global testing standards, currently there's no global testing standard. However, ASTM International and USP have been putting on workshops on cannabis product quality and working to set a global testing standard. This is obviously very difficult because the use of cannabis is legal and illegal in different areas around the world. It has different uses around the world. There's medicinal allowances in some area, and there's consumer allowances in other areas. So it's very difficult to set one particular standard that would apply everywhere. But this is the goal of ASTM International and USP as they're putting together these workshops to hear from around the world to ensure that cannabis testing is as good as it can be and can help protect consumers and as well from a safety perspective. It's really interesting to hear a global point of view. Certain areas that are only using products for medicinal use have certain concerns. Others that are using it for consumer use have other concerns. So these are the main two areas that it seems to be breaking down into. And it's very interesting to hear the different points of view and how they would like these standards to be written. These are open workshops, and so that anyone's invited to attend and to participate and contribute. Hemp versus cannabis, especially here in the U.S., is a bit of a growing debate. In the U.S., hemp is legal and unregulated, but can be developed to have intoxicating properties. So the cannabis industry has become frustrated with some of the testing that's not applied to hemp, with the concern being that often customers don't differentiate between hemp and cannabis. So they want to ensure that untested products don't hit a market in which testing is required and create any disturbances in the overall market reputation. So what's the difference between hemp and cannabis? I'll just cover this briefly for the varied audience members today. Hemp and cannabis are both species of this particular cannabis variation of plant, but hemp typically has a much lower concentration of THC, which is the psychoactive component, the marijuana, and it has legal limits. So that's why less testing is currently required. Hemp does also contain CBD, same compound found in cannabis. And marijuana flowers are known to produce high concentrations of THC, and they can be used recreationally and for other needs, medicinal purposes now. But hemp is also used for other industrial purposes, such as making paper, clothing, and rope, in which case no testing for um, or very little testing is required for the types of things that cannabis would be required to be tested for. So you can see by just going through that brief description how the testing needs of the entire industry is very, very varied. So back to the PrepEngine, this is the PrepTube WW weed whacker tube, which is used for specifically breaking down flowers and preparing them for testing. And so a typical method for flower sample preparation is about 3,000 RPM on the PrepEngine. For the PrepTube WW, the max speed that we recommend is 3,000 RPM. And this works well for breaking down the flower. You don't want to over or under process. So if the flower is over processed, it can become sticky, and that's not ideal. The time in the methods are typically only 30 seconds to a minute and a half. And so you can see from this how quickly the samples can be prepared and broken down into small particles to then be used into testing. And keeping in mind that one tube of throughput is extremely quick, but also with a 2-station, 2 samples can be prepared in parallel, or with a 10-station, 10 samples can be prepared at the same time. So this means that the throughput of the PrepEngine is extremely fast, and this is why most customers are selecting it for their sample preparation use. So today we're talking about cannabis flower, but again, any type of other similar biological material can be prepared, such as hemp or hops or other ideas that you may have for the PrepEngine. So the competitive products for the PrepEngine now are the most common are hand methods, as shown below. Wrist shakers, mortise and pestle are very common. Vortex shakers or magnetic mixers. There's also other semi-automated methods. The ones specifically are slower. The processing is not parallel like the PrepEngine. They require additional cleaning as compared to the PrepEngine, and they often contain metal, which is not ideal when you're trying to do metals testing. One thing about the Weed Whacker PrepTube is that it doesn't contain any metal. So what are the PrepEngine and the PrepTube advantages as we see them? Throughput, as I've described, you can get huge throughput and efficiency increases. And when time is money in the cannabis market, then it's extremely important to have high throughput to save time and labor and the costs associated with each. The convenience of the PrepEngine is very high. The tube itself, as we'll see in a video coming up, is very simple to use. You load your sample in, you place it onto the PrepEngine, it automatically starts while you're loading the next tube. And when it's done, it will stop and let you know that it's prepared and ready for use. The PrepTube Weed Whacker tube is typically single use, while the standard tube is usually for multiple uses. In the PrepTube WW, there's no metal. In the standard tubes, they do have stainless steel blades typically. However, polymer blades are available for other CBD-based products that you may want to use with those tubes. The PrepEngine is efficient and accurate as long as your method design is good with the proper media. If you're using a standard tube, time and speed, the flower product will be fully homogenized. While again, you don't want to over homogenize flower-based or flower product. Extra design factor, since the process is so fast, typically you can allow for a little bit of extra time, and that little bit of extra time will not add anything materially to the overall impact. So it just gives you a little bit of cushion in your designs for your methods. There's design flexibility, so we not only have the standard blades and the Weed Whacker blades, but we can also incorporate other blades very quickly into the design. One example is a bridge breaker blade, which I'm going to show a quick video of so you get an idea of that. And again, the big advantage is really throughput, ease of use. So this is from our previous distributor. This is just a quick video showing the PrepTube Weed Whacker in action with a 2-station and how it's used for preparing flower samples. As you can see in the video, it's very, very easy to use, and you can see already within just seconds that the flower is already getting close to being fully prepared. And then at the end, the PrepTube alerts you that the mixing is complete and the sample is ready. On to the next video. This is just a quick video to show how different blades can be engineered. In this particular case, this was for a CBD-based product where we were asked to test with dog bones, which would have been infused with CBD, and how we could break them down quickly. Now they present a specific challenge with sample preparation in that if you put them into a typical tube, then they'll bridge and hold up in the top of the tube, and so it takes a long time for the dog bone to be slowly broken down. With the bridge breaker blade, however, you'll see how quickly the sample gets prepared. This part of the video shows that dog bones are bridging the tubes. So there's some new developments with the prep engine that we're working on currently. One thing is for sticky cannabis products. They can be very hard to break down for most sample preparation systems. The PrepTube has been tested cryogenically for that type of use so that we can pre-freeze the product or as part of the sample prep. We can do that and we can break down just about anything in that way. For instance, one of the harder things to break down is our gummies or products like that, or chocolates, or brownies, or edible products. And by just adding a little bit of cryogenics to the tube, we can get a nice smooth breakdown into fine particles very quickly. The prep tube, when looking for toxins, you may desire a sterile prep tube, and that can be done too. The prep tube's been tested using a standard 121C autoclave method and can be then reused. So that would be for either tube. If reuse would be with the standard prep tube. So the prep engine's really seeing a growing footprint. It's currently being used all around the world in pharmaceutical companies, specifically for cannabis use. It's now being used in multiple countries. In the US, we're working closely with the largest group of testing labs, and we've done some initial testing, and that we're expecting that we'll be releasing this year prep engines to be used in their labs. So we're really seeing that as the footprint grows, customers, cannabis customers specifically, are learning about the preparation methods that are being used, and then we're hearing that back at other sample testing labs. Lake Superior State University has done a good job working with the prep engine, and we appreciate their help with it as they've trained their students in cannabis lab testing. They've also used the prep engine for sample preparation and given us some important feedback. So what other types of testing would you like to learn about? We've talked about hemp, hops for the beer industry. Herbal medicines are another one that we've talked about. Infectious disease testing is another area that prep tubes could be used for. If there's other applications that you'd like to learn more about, then please feel free to reach out to us after the webinar today, and we'd be happy to talk to you specifically about that, or if there's enough interest, we could put on another webinar for that. So thank you. Please reach out at any time with any questions, applications, or ideas. So back to you, Marissa.
Thank you, Martin. And I apologize. I failed to mention that we encourage audience participation. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A area or Q&A widget on your screen. I see that a couple of people already figured out that widget is available. So I do have couple of questions here from the audience, and hopefully we'll give some time for others to send in their questions if there are any. So the first question, Martin, is can other products besides flour be homogenized with the prep engine?
Yes, specifically within the cannabis industry, there's many types of products that are infused with CBD. And so all of these products can be tested with the prep engine. So typically the testing houses will want to start with flower applications and use the prep tube and the PrepTube WW. And then once they find out the usefulness there, then we often learn more about other products that can be tested. So CBD is infused into everything from material that you might wear or use to edibles, as I've said, to just about anything. And we haven't found anything yet that can't be broken down with the prep engine for sample preparation. So if there's any applications out there where their customers are having a specific um, issue with anything they'd like to break down for testing, then we'd love to hear more about them.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
I have another question here. Does Pion or Two Square offer testing for different applications?
Absolutely. We often get products that come into our testing labs that we'll need to break down. Some are very easy because we've done a bunch of them before. The dog bones, as I showed here, were a good example of one that we hadn't seen before. So we ran into issues when we first started doing our testing. That's why it's always good to do application testing. It's always good to prove out that the prep engine will be useful and the prep tubes will be useful for the sample preparation that the customers are trying to do. And in the case of the dog bones, we were able to uh, at first struggle a little bit and then come up with a different blade type that worked good to solve the bridging application and then provide these results back to the customer all free of charge.
Thank you. Are the prep tubes able to work with sticky products?
Yes, they are. So one of the things that I mentioned in the presentation was cryogenics. So even flour itself can become cryogenic. I'm sorry, can become sticky if it's over processed. So that's one area to be concerned about. In that case, you just want to adjust the method so that you're getting the right particle breakdown, but you're not over processing. In cases where the flour itself may have sticky terpenes, which you wouldn't want to stick to the outer edges of the tube, then that would be a good case to bring cryogenics in so that the small particles and the product itself are frozen, brought down to a really low temperature, and then broken down into small particles. And that way you can get around the stickiness. The same thing applies to edibles are notorious for being sticky. So if you had a case of edible like chocolate or something like that, where the chocolate becomes sticky as it starts to break down, then you'd want to use a little bit of cryogenics with that. Again, the prep tube is perfectly happy with that. It'll break it down into small particles. Tissue, like human tissue or animal tissue, is another area where you may experience stickiness. And again, that's another good area to use cryogenics in the prep tube with.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. I did want to mention that the presentation today was recorded, and everyone that registered for the webinar will get an email with a link to the recording. We're also going to have it available on our website and our YouTube channel. So at this time, I want to thank Martin for sharing all these interesting information with us. And I want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. And I also want to make sure that you, or be sure, I should say, to check our website regularly for upcoming webinars and other events, as well as past on-demand presentations. Our website is www.pion-inc.com. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, and thanks, Martin, again for joining us today.
Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate it. Please reach out with any questions that you have.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.